Hi, this is Bill Clodsey. Today we're doing a little magic lesson here. We've got the 7 steps of sealed. This is what I do when I open a sealed deck and go through from start to finish. Often online you'll have 20 minutes to build a deck. In real life you'll have 30 minutes, including some time for registration. And at a pre-release you may have more than that even. But you want to make the most of that time and have the best chance of having the best deck. So what are the 7 steps? The first thing I do is take a look at the power. So often you'll sort by rarity to identify the power in your pool. So the mythics, the rares, and even into the uncommons, you'll find what cards are the strongest. So you'll have a few standouts. Now, even in the commons, there will be 1 or 2 creatures that are kind of above the rest, and certainly the removal spells at common can be worth looking at as well. The next thing you want to do to understand your pool is to identify the fixing. So any dual lands you open, any lands that fix, the colorless fixing is important, so any colorless artifact that can find a land or add mana is worth looking at. And even looking at the colors, usually it'll be green that has the most fixing, just to see what you're able to do with your pool. Now once you've looked at your power and your fixing, just sort your pool into the colors and take a look at each color one by one. And what you're looking for there, you can lay out the curve of creatures and set aside the most powerful spells. Often that'll be the removal. And then you'll have an idea of what kind of synergy you have. So in Ixalan or something, you're going to see if you have enough Merfolk to really make a Merfolk deck in blue. And then once you hit green, you'll be able to see if green is cooperating and you really can make a deck out of it. But understanding each color individually will help you understand if you can make a combination. And finally, you want to keep in mind the splashable cards. So the very best creatures and removal spells, or whatever spells that are just so good. And keep those in mind, especially if they only have 1 symbol of that color, because they're easier to splash. Okay, once you've laid that out and kind of isolated the cards you're really interested in, make 2 piles. This is what I do. The very playable pile, so this is what you'll be pretty confident you'll put in your deck if you're playing that color. And then the not so playable cards. The things that are just sideboard only or just low power. And it's not that they won't make your deck, but those will be what you add in when you're making the final decisions. Now a color, if it's bad enough, if it just has too few cards, too few playables, even if it has 1 or 2 good things, you might just rule it out. And in which case you'll put it aside and maybe just as 1 pile, but keep the splashable cards on top, just so you consider the color but just for splashing 1 or 2 cards. Or if it's dominated, so let's say your color, your green and red are very similar, but green has a couple more bombs or like removal spells than red. The red is just a worse version of your green, so you can kind of say, well, unless I'm playing green-red, then I want to be playing green. Once you look at every single color, and you can take the cards from those colors and kind of make one big stack, keeping the playables and best cards on top, and the lower you go down, the worse they get with the not-so-playable cards. Then you're going to build decks. And you want to start by building the most compelling decks, or maybe there's like some powerful cards that really draw you into 2 colors. Well, start there. And then you take those very playable piles from those 2 colors, put them together, lay out the curve, and then fill it in and see what it looks like, see what the 23 cards look like. And you do that for a couple combinations. You can even look at mana balance at this point. But if that doesn't really work, if you're not finding enough power in 2 colors, what you can do, and this works especially if you do have some fixing in the pool, is just add all the best cards. Sometimes your power is spread out. It happens. You won't always get the lucky, all your rares and mythics are in 2 colors. Sometimes it's more spread out. And you can start by adding the very best cards one at a time, add the artifacts that you're going to play in all your colors. And this is kind of like the alternate way to start and approach this. And once you start doing that and then adding worse and worse cards, but still the very good ones, you'll sort of see, okay, I think these 2 or 3 colors are going to build the best deck out of this. And then you can kind of put the other powerful cards aside and try to hone in on 2 or 3 colors that work for you. So 2 approaches to building decks. Certainly the most common one is to just look at 2 color combinations. Once you find a good deck and you're confident you've found the best one, then you're going to tune it. And this means making sure your curve lines up a bit, less important for sealed. You just want to kind of maximize the power. But look at it and consider splashing maybe the best cards. Maybe you don't have quite enough removal, so you dip into white for pacifism, something like that, if the fixing is there. So you can spend some time tuning it, and once you're ready to submit, once you have the best deck in mind, there's a few more steps you can consider. And these you could even do after you've submitted, but you're going to consider alternatives and sideboard options. And you can use your extra time to memorize your deck. You don't have to, going through that whole process will help you memorize the deck. You might have a pretty good idea. But to keep in mind, well, how many lands are you playing? And that'll give you an idea of how likely it is for you to draw a land, or a land of a specific color, for mulligan decisions and just all kinds of decisions. And but you really want to realize that sideboarding is an extension of your deck. You can get a lot of advantage by remembering that you have a naturalize in your deck to answer certain threats, or a plummet, something to deal with flyers. You might not want to start that card in your main deck, but it's a big improvement to your worst card if they do have a couple powerful flyers. So remember those situational cards. And you can, once you're pretty confident in your main deck, you still have 10, 15 more minutes, you can just try other options and be more confident that your choice was correct. And the last thing is not always necessary, but if your second best deck looks pretty close to your first best deck, the one you decided to go with, you can consider a transformational sideboard. So I've done this many times, but it takes a lot of work, or can take a lot of work, and you don't always have to do it if your best deck's much better than any alternative, and it might not be possible. But you could do 2 completely different colors, so it's almost 2 independent decks, but make sure to move all your artifacts that you want from one to the other. Or maybe it just shares 1 color, and you build 1 very aggressive deck for games 1 or when you're on the play, and your other deck might be a more powerful deck but slower, and you can side into that if it seems good. It also throws your opponent for a loop, because they might be siding against your fast deck, and they won't be prepared for the card advantage that you get in the controlling matchup. So a typical thing to do with a transformational sideboard is to start with your aggressive deck, side into the control, and then back to aggro. So this is something you can do later in the tournament, if you have the patience for it. You don't want to be doing that during sideboarding time, because you need to be quick. Online you only have a couple minutes to sideboard, so you need to know what your plan is. And in live Magic, you're just going to get you should get a slow play call if you're taking too long sideboarding. So try to have it sleeved up or something. Cool. So those are the steps to maximize your chances to win. They might not be exactly what yours look like, but see if they're similar, and maybe you want to incorporate some of that. And I will say it does vary from format to format. So if it's an extremely multicolored format, maybe you want to spend more time or mix things up a bit. Okay, so the next format coming out is M19. So we can take a look at some of those cards for the purposes here. Right, so what's the first step? Identify the power. You're going to open some rares, hopefully some mythics, and have some idea of what is alluring to you, what looks good. So if it's a planeswalker, it's likely going to be good. All of the planeswalkers in M19 are pretty powerful. The most conditional one is Liliana, which requires you to have some zombies in your deck, but there's a couple common zombies and they go up in value a lot if you have Liliana. The other mythics, there's some you can just rule out. Omniscience, don't try to play this card if you're trying to trying to win. Apex of Power is similar. It just takes a little too much mana to get there, but more playable than Omniscience. And then Scapeshift. It doesn't look like there's a big Scapeshift deck in this format. So, well, if you find one, good luck, but I wouldn't look too hard. There's one more monocolored mythic, which is Nexus of Fate. Expensive, but taking an extra turn is powerful, and then if you go super late, you can use this as your win condition, you know, if it's the last card in your deck. Probably good enough. It just depends on the speed of the format, which is yet to be determined. So if we zoom down a bit here, we're going to see some more mythics and power that'll be exciting to open. So we have these Shard Elder Dragons all coming back here. We've got Arcades. Shout out to Arcades. Arcades Sabbath was the original one, so that's my namesake. And Chromium, Nicol Bolas, Palladium Moors, and Vivictus Asmodai. All of these are super powerful. They're going to each have their strengths, and you want to maximize those if you end up playing them. And the other thing worth looking at for your power are these uncommon double color things. We have the full cycle, one of each color combination. And some of these really depend on if your deck has that particular synergy, like Satyr Enchanter. If you're in green-white, that should be maybe a deck that plays a bunch of enchantments. But if not, if you are in green-white, but you don't have that many enchantments, you might leave this out because it's just a 3-mana 2/2. But, you know, the rest of them look pretty good. Some of them are less conditional, like Poison Tip Archer. You just have to put this in a deck and it's going to be good. And that kind of goes to the next point, which is fixing. Some of these really require a synergistic deck, but if you have a good deck for it, but it's not in your main colors, you want some fixing. And that's especially true of the 3-color mythics here, which are all very powerful. And Draconic Disciple is a piece of fixing, but it means you ought to be in red-green as your base colors. But we have these this cycle of basic lands here, so these will be fairly common to open. You're going to open these in your sealed pool. They won't always match the colors you're in, but if they do match, they're very good, and you should look for that. Or if they're kind of half on color, it makes it easier to splash whatever color, and all that's pretty obvious. Rupture Spire is the uncommon piece of fixing here, and if you're in 2 particular colors, then the dual land of those colors is going to be more powerful than Rupture Spire, but it gets more interesting if you're in 3 colors, certainly. Okay, for more colorless fixing, we have Manolith, and typically the last time this card was around was in Hour of Devastation, and it was good there because you would be happy to splash off-color bombs like the Sandworm Convergence and Overwhelming Splendor. So if you have 8 mana off-color bombs, then this card is great. It depends on the speed of the format and how often you're splashing stuff. But if you're splashing and you have expensive stuff, Manolith is very good. Okay. So not too much more in the fixing, although any artifact card, any colorless card, kind of helps you lighten the burden on your colored sources, because you don't have to have any color sources in it. It sort of reduces, if you're playing a colorless card, it sort of reduces the number of color requirements you have in your deck. So early creatures like Diamond Mare or something just make it easier to play a 3-color deck. So keep that in mind. Crucible of Worlds, some of these cards are just reprints for whatever, and I don't think there's a real deck for it, so get excited because it might be worth something, but don't try too hard to play it. Okay, so that's some of the power. You can look out for combos like Regal Bloodlord. I do like Fountain of Renewal quite a bit. You don't want to load your deck up with it. If you open 3, you have to be careful playing too many. But gaining a life each turn and then replacing itself eventually can be a powerful early play. Or just a top deck in the late game when you have a bunch of mana. So this one's going to be pretty good in the format, I think. And it looks like the format is rather slow. Okay, so what else? Last thing we'll look at here is some of the removal at common in each of the colors, and you can sort out the power and the rares on your own. So at white we have Take Vengeance, destroy target tapped creature. Kind of hard to play around because you need to attack, and a little hard to evaluate because it's pretty conditional, and the creature would have had to attack already and survive, so it might have hit you, or at least killed a creature. So maybe it's not as good, and it's sorcery speed, so you have to play it on your turn. But certainly worth playing. It is removal, after all, and pretty cheap. Strangling Spores, this is like a weakened version of Flatten, which gave -4/-4, but it is instant, and pretty powerful for that. And -3/-3 is going to deal with most things. Up here we have Rabid Bite. This is the one piece of, I guess it's a punch effect rather than a fight. So your creature's just going to hit theirs with its power. And that's extremely good. The best removal green gets. And Shock, always good, but has diminishing returns since there are a bunch of creatures that this is not going to kill. But it's a fine way to finish off a creature if you really have to. You just don't want too many in your deck, but the first one is pretty important. And it is format dependent, so it's yet to be seen. Okay, Plummet, sideboard material, but very good sideboard material. Luminous Bonds kind of goes with green-white's theme of having enchantments and things, but that's your pacifism effect, which is very good, probably white's best common removal. Lich's Caress. This I would call black's best common removal. At 5 mana, gaining the life back is a good way to go. It is sorcery speed, so you're going to need something to put on the field before doing this, but I would definitely play a bunch of these. Just make sure you don't neglect the board. Okay, Essence Scatter. Blue has a few common counter spells, and you'll have to play around these, but Essence Scatter is definitely a good one. This is a creature-based format, and there are some crazy bombs at Rare and Mythic that you'll want to deal with, and some early stuff just to keep pace with your opponent. What else? Okay, so we're getting towards the uncommons here. Fiery Finish is a weird one. This almost looks like a sideboard card to me. 7 damage to target creature at sorcery speed for 6 mana. So unless there are some things you can't deal with otherwise, it's not a huge pull into red. Back to common again, we have Electrify, which is going to be the best red removal spell, I would think, over Shock, because it deals with more. It's instant, so that's pretty good. And then another counter spell from blue at common, Cancel. It's not quite as good as actual removal, but it does its thing, and it's kind of like removal. It's like soft removal. Okay, and blue has some other bounce effects which are worth considering. Alright, what else do we have? Active Treason is worth noting because there are some sacrifice outlets, and that's the combo. You steal their creature and then sacrifice it before they get it back. Now I will note the best uncommon removal of each color, which is Switcheroo for blue. Exchange control of 2 target creatures. Now you have to remember, if either creature leaves before this resolves, nothing changes sides. But you just give them your worst thing and you take their best thing. That could be very powerful and quite splashable. Sleep is pretty much like double Time Walk at times, it feels. If your board's better than theirs, and you can't even play around this card. In a board stall situation, Sleep will just win the game. Good luck against that. Hopefully you're on the delivering side. Black has Murder, which is solid instant speed, deals with anything. And let's see, at uncommon, red's great removal spell is Lightning Strike, and white has Hieromancer's Cage, which is kind of your Oblivion Ring effect, and you want as many of these as you can get. So great, that just about sums it up. There are good rares, and you'll just have to take a look at those yourself. Happy opening there. Anyway, so after taking a look at M19, that's not up yet on Magic Online, but I'll kind of go over these steps with Dominaria Sealed League, and we'll just open that real quick. So switch over here, join this league, and what I'll do is build the deck here so you can see how it's done. And then I guess I will play this league through on my stream, which I'll plug here. So if you go to Twitch, I stream from time to time as Sabbath22. You can check me out there. And I guess if you're if you catch me there streaming this, then you can look forward to the video that I'll post about building the deck. So I'll build the deck here and then stream the matches just to have it somewhere. And if you go follow, I'm sure you'll be able to look up that. It'll say Dominaria Sealed League something or other. Okay, so the first thing we do is look for the power. And if we sort by rarity, that's pretty easy to do online. We're going to see, well, the best cards and the reasons to play these colors. So Dominaria is kind of funny because it's not a huge multicolor format. It's pretty similar to what you'll see in M19, but it has a lot of bombs at uncommon. So it's in that sense, it's different than what you'll see. We have some good ones here. Muldrotha, Ariel, and Zahid. Makes me hope that I have some good fixing. Hinterland Harbor does help with Muldrotha, and Zahid is on color. Dreadshade is pretty specific about when it's good, and it doesn't seem super great here. And Druidic Vow is not great. So we have 3 powerful rares. At uncommon, we have some pulls into green. Elfheim Druids can be good in the right deck. Curator's Ward's not so good. We'll take a look at our removal. Goblin Barrage is great. Yargle's great. The really interesting stuff comes in these legends here. So we have Rona and Titiova, which both go along super well with Muldrotha. And if we're also splashing white, then we have Wrath and certainly Yargle. So if we play everything but red, then we can play all of this stuff, and that'll be insane. 2 Juggernauts to just throw in the mix, and they can be super annoying for an opponent to deal with. And then we look at the common removal. So Blessed Light is a huge pull into white, and we're also looking for just the best of the best. Wow, double Grow from the Ashes. We'll also be on the lookout for the fixing. So we'll pull those up for now. And Shivan Fire is definitely premium removal in red, so we'll keep an eye on that as well. Cloudreader Sphinx, that's also on the same level. Okay, so what have we done here? We have, also Elfheim Druids. They're going to add extra mana for the kicked spells, so that's kind of a huge combo with Grow from the Ashes here. So all these things we can take a look at real quick and kind of see what colors they draw us into. Basically everything but red, although we have a couple good red cards. Next, that's our power, just so we see it. Next, we're going to sort by color and take a look at the fixing. So the fixing is going to exist mostly in green, and we'll have some artifacts, hopefully. So 1 Skittering Surveyor, better than 0, much better than 0, and a Hinterland Harbor. So both of those help out quite a bit. And we have a little ramp besides that, but our other good creatures, well, we don't have too much, but Double Juggernaut, Blood Tallow Candle, and 1 pretty good equipment, Short Sword. All right, so now that we know a bit about our fixing, which also includes 2 Grow from the Ashes in green, step number 3 is look at each color. So we want to know what all of our colors do. So we can take a look at the creature curve. So in white, we don't have many creatures, so this is one of those colors that's going to be pretty easy to rule out. But the best creature here is Pegasus Courser, and it has 1 really good spell, Blessed Light, and you'd probably always play Invoke the Divine. Kind of situational, but in sealed, these disenchant effects get more important, and it turns out this card is just great in this format. But there's little enough here, besides the splashable cards, that I'm going to put this all in one pile, and then put the most compelling cards at the very top, like Blessed Light. If we splash anything, it'll be for that. And these multicolor cards. Okay, next color. Might as well just go in order here, but that's just up to your preference. And right away, I'm going to remove cards that don't belong in the deck. So the first Unwind probably doesn't belong. And then the best card here is Blink of an Eye, then like Deep Freeze or something. Might not play any Unwinds. And we have 2 really good creatures, Zahid and Cloudreader Sphinx. Besides that, we have Academy Drake. So these are the very best cards we have. And we don't really want to play a Scholar, so that's going to go into the not very playable pile. But I guess it would be fine to bring in if we needed a 3-drop. Not super excited about the Explorer, but again, it could make it a deck and be fine. Okay, so the stuff we would almost certainly play is left over here. We've got an opt and 3 creatures. All right, take a look at black. And this is this is a deck where we might end up just building it the second way, which is put in all our very best cards in 4 colors and see what emerges. Dreadshade, again, this is a very good card if you are playing enough swamps, but just completely unplayable if you can't cast it. Let's see. Skinwitch is good. Okay, not a ton in black. Our best cards are like Yargle, Skinwitch, Fungal Infection, but none of these are like really good reasons to play the color. So I think this is going to be another color that we're splashing, if anything. But we'll probably splash it for Muldrotha, Ariel, and Rona. It just won't be our primary color. So what are we likely to splash from here? I guess the most likely things are like Deathbloom Thallid, Dark Bargain, Fungal Infection, and Yargle. So we'll keep those near the top. We'll keep those in mind. Take a look at red. Red has some pretty unplayable creatures and a lot of 4-drops and Radiating Lightnings, which are worth noting because there might be some Saproling deck with a lot of 1/1s that this gets rid of. But yeah, red has 1 really good card, Shivan Fire. Goblin Barrage also very good. 2 Keldon Raiders is pretty fine. The Chronicler, but just not really enough here. And obviously we want to do the sweet deck here with all of our legends. So green, hopefully that can be the real base for the deck. And it looks like it has a lot of early drops. Migration is great, more of like a 6-drop creature. I wouldn't be too keen on playing the Druidic Vow, but don't count it out. I mean, it does get legendary permanents and lands, so that helps fixing, and if somehow you cast that for 8, you can pick up your Muldrotha. Gift of Growth is a pump spell. Certainly you could play that, but it's not something I'm really amped up to do. Druid, Envoy, that's some nice fixing. Corrosive Ooze would be an okay 2-drop, but yeah. So that's what we're left with in green. Some good ramp, some random creatures, and now we've looked at every color. So the next step here is to take a look at a color combination of 2 cards. I'll just show what that looks like. So let's say we're looking at blue-green. We would take down our playable pile there, and we're left with 15 cards. So we put in our Titiova, we put in all the artifacts that we might want, and we have 19 cards. So we would fill this in with you know, the Muldrotha and the, where is it, the Surveyor and the Rona and things like that. That would be one way to go. And then let's say we decided we needed another 2-drop, we could put in the Corrosive Ooze or something like that. But the way that's going to be better for a pool like this, to put all that stuff back there, is to just take the very best of the best cards and put those in first. So ideally, in an ideal world, we're going to be playing Zahid, we're going to be playing Muldrotha, Titiova, Rona, Ariel, a lot of good cards here. And while we're at it, Raf, Capuchin, because all these things are castable there. We definitely want both Grow from the Ashes. The Sphinx probably, something to survive early, so any early removal that we can get our hands on is going to be better. The 2 Druids, because a turn 2 Druid means a turn 3 kicked Grow from the Ashes, which is pretty absurd. Academy Drake, also something that benefits from the Druids. Krosan Druid benefits from the Druids, and it's just a fine body to have in play early. The Surveyor definitely comes in. I wonder about these Juggernauts. They might be good enough. And that'll come in. If we're playing this much white, Blessed Light looks worth it. Off of 1 Plains and Skittering Surveyor and double Grow from the Ashes, that already gives 4 sources of white for 3 white cards. And that might be just about enough. Okay. How about these? How about both Juggernauts? Right. So this is the second way of building the deck, and once we get up to about 23 playables and have a playable thing, we will be able to tune it a bit. So I think it'll look something like this. And then we can consider alternatives like playing Druidic Vow, which normally you just wouldn't consider. It doesn't seem good enough. But once we do a count of like how many things it actually hits, it might turn out to be more appealing. It's already 9 cards that it hits into play, plus all of our lands. So that's a good, 32. That's about 3/4 of our deck already. 26 cards, something like that. And that just depends on whether we play 18 or 17 lands. And in Sealed, you usually want to play more lands than Draft, which will be more aggressive. And in this format, when you have mana sinks and Titiovas that benefit from landfall, I find it's even more common to play 18 lands, even in Draft. Okay, great. Blood Tallow Candle. It's not bad with Muldrotha to have some extra things to trade off early. Ancient Animus will be good. So, okay. Then we'll have a better idea if we can make this work after doing a bit of mana balance. I think we might want to cut something like the Krosan Druid or a Juggernaut. probably the Juggernaut, and end up at 22 lands. Although we do have 2 Elfheim Druids, so it's unclear if we even need them with 2 Grow from the Ashes. And we could do 17 lands. But this would be a deck I'd like to be on the play with. And then the Candle helps for a couple of reasons. That helps with Mildrotha, because it's an artifact we can play and replay again and again. And it also helps with Zahid, which can come down on turn 4 with a Candle. But it's good enough just as a 6-drop. That might be a reason to play the Short Sword, or even Sparring Construct. It looks like a fun deck. Well, that's 22 cards. Let's see if we can make the mana work. 8, so stack up the mana here. We have mostly green, which is good because we have early green and the fixing is in green. And then a bunch of blue. So it's what, 10 green, 9 blue, so plenty of blue. Then we'll have our black cards. So we have 3 black cards and 3 white cards. So it's kind of a double splash for black and white. Shouldn't be too hard to manage that. Add basic lands. It wants a lot of white, apparently. Eight, 7, 1, 1, and that gives us a little wiggle room here with 18 lands. So we might get away with adding 1 more of a color, and that color, I'm not sure if that should be black or white. Maybe 1 of each, because the mana is pretty good. So we do something like this, and then cut a blue. Add 1 of each, and then, let's see, cut another blue. Because some of the blue stuff is pretty late. We need double blue, but it's a little easier to get double blue when we have a bunch of green. Mildrotha. What is later is another thing to look at. I guess they're both pretty late, black and white. Is that enough? 9 sources, 9, 6, 2, 2. Yeah, this looks decent. I'm not positive on the mana balance here, but it's really hard for me to know which one of black or white to cut. So, play 2 of each. And we'll be on the play with a deck like this. We might want 1 more green source and just like pick one to get rid of here. I guess white. And I'll leave an extra black in. Okay, and then add 1 more green. Sure. So that's a quarter of our deck is green sources, and that lets us do all we want to on turn 2. And I'm pretty confident about this. So one more thing I'll do here. So now this is on to step 5 here, sort of consider alternatives, is take a look at what we have for the sideboard. If we're against a lot of 3/1s or something, we have a construct. If we're against a storm deck, we have Damping Sphere. If we're against things like Seal Away, we have Gifts of Growth to untap our stuff, but we sort of have enough power here innately that we don't want to dilute it with combat tricks. Get rid of that. Divest if our opponent's deck is way too powerful, but divests are a lot worse when you're splashing for it. Fungal Infection. Yargle, which might be good enough, but it's not better than any of our 5-drops. And I don't want to cut white because Ariel is too powerful and Raf Capuchin is just good enough. Cool. Invoke the Divine would be worth splashing in white, but Blessed Light does take care of some of the enchantments, and then we'd have to sort of reevaluate if we're playing one plains or one swamp. Anyway, Unwind can counter some things, so that's a good look at that. And Transformational sideboard, shoot, that would be kind of difficult to do. But I will also consider one alternative here, which is to play the Druidic Vow somehow. Let's see what this does again. Look at the top X card, so it's X plus 2 green. You may put any number of land or legendary permanents with converted mana cost X or less from among them onto the battlefield. Oh, they can't be artifacts. They have to be legendary permanents. So we don't actually have that many. And by the time we're casting this, I would rather just cast any of our legends. So yeah, I think that's going to not be it. That's not going to be it. Corrosive Druid, that's kind of a silly card. Our deck's pretty powerful, so having an early play makes sense. That might be a cut for Yargle or something, but I'm pretty confident that this is about the best we can do. Great. So that went through the whole process. Let me know if you have any questions, and if you want to see how this deck does, be my guest. Now, M19 is not up online. It does come up online fairly soon, so I'll try to get a sealed early up from that format as well. But hopefully you enjoyed this, and good luck at your pre-release or just your sealeds in general.